I'm Stacey, and our panelists will introduce themselves. Go on.
Hey, Stacey. Hey, everybody. I'm Warren Logan. I work at the Mayor's Office and serve as her Policy Director of Mobility and Interagency Relations.
Hello, everybody. My name is Vignesh Swaminathan. I'm the CEO and President of CROSSROAD Lab. We are an engineering firm located in the Bay Area that designs and delivers roadway and bikeway projects. I also run the TikTok channel, Mr. Barricade, where I talk to folks about urban planning, design, and how to create a sustainable future for us all.
Hi everybody, my name is Colin Roche. I'm CEO of Swiftmile. We make smart parking and charging infrastructure for micromobility, along with digital displays that present different transit data and PSAs for cities, along with digital ads that help pay for the whole thing.
All right, hi everyone, I'm Courtney Sung. I'm with Remix. We build collaborative transportation planning software for over 350 cities and transit agencies around the world. I'm really excited to be here today and talk about slow streets. We were also recently acquired by a company called Via. It's a leading transportation technology provider.
Excellent, thanks guys. So back when COVID halted all normal daily life, the hush that fell was almost deafening. Now I've lost my brain. Okay, we're all at home scared to death, but it was an enormous wake-up call to nearly everyone. The birds, the wildlife returning to places that were once theirs, and free to do it because we, and more importantly, nearly all motor vehicles were still. I was locked up at home in San Francisco, but was watching with great anticipation and a bit of envy at the activity across the bay in Oakland, where Warren Logan was working on and reporting out on the slow streets implementation there. This is when I declared myself the VP of Warren's fan club. But now it's 18 months later. How is it all going, Warren? Is it all still there?
It is all still there, and for folks who don't know, Oakland launched our Slow Streets program just 18 months ago now. We said that we're going to do 74 miles. We're only up to 30 so far, which I think is also a plus because we've learned a lot from our community residents about how to launch things faster. We've got slow streets, we've got essential places, and we have flex streets.
Okay, well, so this community involvement thing is something that I get kind of hung up on. Because I typically only see drivers coming out and wanting to keep all the stuff for themselves. Do we need to tell them what is happening? Do we need to give them a choice?
I think, yeah, but we also need to show people. And what's exciting about what Slow Streets did and also Essential Places and Flex Streets is that instead of talking about things in a hypothetical sense, what happens if we think about closing a street, we closed the street and had a conversation about what it felt like then. And it helped people, I think, sharpen their feedback with us from, I used to drive on the street and now my kids get to play out here, so maybe I'm gonna change my opinion about these types of programs.
I like that. So wait a minute, people are capable of changing their opinions?
Some people, not me of course, but I'm just kidding. Yes, and it's been amazing though to see people almost in real time showcase how much their opinions have been changed. For many of you, you probably are familiar with the business owners that say, not over my dead parking spot shall you ever put a bike lane. And now I've got folks just the opposite saying, you're not gonna get rid of our parklets, right? I'm like, well, they're your parklets, so let's keep them. Like, to see people make those changes now in their minds especially is so incredible. And I'm excited to see what the next few years are gonna look like for us.
Awesome. And so, yes, I don't like asking people their opinions if it's going to differ with mine. But Courtney, it seems like Remix can help show different options. Can you talk about how the visualizations that Remix provides can help us really make more non-car space?
Yes, absolutely. So it's gonna sound a little cheesy, but are you guys familiar with the concept of manifesting? If you build a vision board and if you design it, maybe they will come around to it. I really do believe this is very important for cities because otherwise what people see is the status quo. They see cars designed for streets and that's all they think about. So if you provide them with several options about what could be possible, here's how you might use the space. Here's how you might think about a different use of this space. Don't worry, it's temporary or it's just a design. Like that kind of work is actually so important for getting the public on board with understanding what's possible. I think also just the fact that, I don't know if anyone here has worked with an AutoCAD design. Major props to the transportation engineers. I know you're one of them. They take a really long time to make. You present them at a workshop and you're like, oh my God, it's so official. It's like very formal. And so I think people kind of seize that when they see a very final looking thing. So we really believe that providing more sketch planning design tools that can actually get people on board like in the process. Oh, you don't like this one? Let's redesign it. Here's another scenario. Oh, you don't like that one? We actually thought about that. Here's your other option. That kind of work actually brings people along instead of sort of shutting down from the very beginning. So visualization is really important.
And Courtney, you also, in our call, you mentioned that you can measure who's using a space. How do you get the data so that planners actually know what's happening out there? And is this useful? Because I think of the adage of, you don't build bridges by counting who's swimming.
It's a good adage, yes. So I think, we do get data from a lot of different sources. Many of the devices and companies in this room are now providing new sources of data. We get GPS data, we get machine learning from cameras. There's a lot of data sets out there. I think the main thing that's really important, especially for cities, and Warren can speak ad nauseum about this, is making sure that the data we have is representative of all the people who are using the street. So just not just smartphone app competitive biker types, but also like people who might not bike and feel comfortable about it. So they might have a survey or someone who was actually standing at the intersection and clicking. Like the real thing is helping cities see all of that data in one place and sort of analyzing it together. But it's very cool because when you do things like close down slow streets, we can then use some of these data sets to say, yeah, before actually traffic speed was this. This is a great example in New York City. They closed down 14th Street to cars, right? And then they were able to analyze that didn't actually affect the traffic speeds on any other streets nearby. Like, let's keep doing this.
And the sky didn't fall down.
And the sky didn't fall down, and people still kind of got around. I'm sorry, New Yorkers, for your storm issues. So I feel like just being able to use the data and actually go back to the data, that's the most important part. People kind of get it, and then they forget about it and use it once. You got to use it multiple times.
Excellent. And when I think of making space for people, I want all of the light modes to be available to access this space. Colin, you enable the charging of these lighter modes. Can any of the scooters, bikes, et cetera, that are out here, can they all really hook up to the docks? Because I just held a charger with me from San Francisco, and it would be nice to not have to do that.
Yeah, no, so we're firm believers in the whole idea of universality and being able to really support all the different vehicles, many of which are all in this room, which is super exciting to see this explosion of innovation with stuff out there. I've seen things that you'd think 4 or 5 years ago were not even possible. But the key to this is, you have to have some form of infrastructure that really supports the ecosystem. It's like cars. They don't have one parking spot for a Ford and one for a BMW. Maybe, well, they do for Tesla, obviously, but that's a little different story. But yeah, we kind of feel as though we're like a piece of this puzzle to really support this whole kind of movement, which is fantastic to see, to really get us out of this shit show, which is the whole world's kind of on fire right now, and we need to find ways to get people out of their cars and really support emission-free vehicles. And so, we're a piece of this puzzle, but we support everybody in this room to help make it happen.
And how does it work? It's about me. So if I roll up with the bike that I brought here today, which, let's say it's mine, can I just plug it in? Like, do you bill me? Like, how does that all work?
No, so the way our model works is we have complete charging free for everybody, free for the operators, free for the city. As a matter of fact, we revenue share with the city. We created this sort of model where it allows us, if we get a permit to operate and access to power, oftentimes we can use solar, which is great. We put our system down and we have our digital ad platform that helps support and pay for the whole thing. But in turn, we also give space on there for, like I mentioned, like Transit Screen is a great partner of ours. We can stream any kind of transportation option or schedule within a 5-minute walk. And so, yeah, for sure, we want to make this so it's frictionless and easy to use.
Okay, now, Mr. Barricade. Oh my God, I didn't think Warren was ever going to have competition, but...
No, I knew I had competition because I follow him on his TikTok, and I was like, shit, man, now I got to be better.
I know. I mean, I'm such a big fan of your work on TikTok and in the real world. The San Jose Protected Bike Network is a thing of beauty. Protection-wise. And you should look at the videos that are on the Bitly thing, or go to TikTok and just look for Mr. Barricade. But these are quick builds. Mm-hmm. Are they intended to be final builds? How quick are they? Do they get better looking?
So they are not meant to be final, but many cities like them to be final because it's a lot of effort to go talk to that community and go work with that community. And once they give that community like an apple, then they don't come back. They give them more. And so a lot of cities use quick build to kind of skate by talking to different communities. Something we advocate for is to make it be an everlasting and ongoing process with cities. But a lot of times cities, when they pave a street, they just put it down and then they move on to the next street. It's part of the master planning delivery process. With these protected bike lanes, it's about what the ultimate design solution is, which is dealing with the different differentials of speed. So we have pedestrians going at a certain speed. We have slow-moving scooters going at a certain speed. We eventually will have faster-moving EVs, or small bikes that go up to 50 miles an hour going at a different speed, and then vehicles. And there's already an ultimate solution that we can envision of a protected bike lane that has separation for bikeways, and we're trying to work towards that final solution. At the end of the day, most cities' streets are going to be having a protected facility or protected intersection of some sort eventually, and it'll either prioritize bikes or scooters in some way, either by putting them in front of the vehicles or by keeping them to the side. And we can work towards that ultimate solution by using quick build. It's part of educating the community by them actually feeling it and testing it and giving feedback on it. We've had a lot of secret tricks that we've had up our sleeve when we help communities get used to these facilities. Like we might take away a right turn pocket with water-based paint, knowing we're going to come back and give it back to them. And those minor wins, political wins, give approval for the rest of the project.
Very sneaky. I like it.
Can I add something to that point really quickly, which is that by showcasing that you can change something quickly and in fact prove that maybe we made a mistake and we're going to change it, that also builds trust with everyday folks. Because I think to your point, when we say it's a pilot, you're like, I know that's not true. It's going to be permanent, so let's just talk about it like it's permanent. But to be able to say, if you don't like it and it's Wednesday, I'll remove it on Friday, being able to do that really changes the way that you talk to people, whether it's watercolors, et cetera.
Can we just tweak that instead of if you don't like it, if it's not working?
Even better.
Okay, great. And I so appreciate the safety aspect of all the stuff you're building out in your designs. I wish we were so lucky in San Francisco, home of soft hit posts at best. I love this whole thing and turning car space of all types over to people. You mentioned, Vignesh, that you are working on converting car space in virgin territory. And I thought it was such a cool story. Can you share a little bit about this project?
Sure. Well, we work on a wide variety of projects, some of them urban and some rural. And we've been working on towns that have never, ever had a roadway project ever. They've never done a striping project. The only project they've done have been replacing water mains or not maybe putting in a couple curb ramps. And so going into these communities is very different than when I work with some of the communities out here or some of the tech campuses that I work with out here that are really into and ready to do it all. And so talking about this is very political, and so a lot of our work is doing iterations of the work over and over again and working with the business leaders and the city staff on how much are they willing to bite politically. And so what we're working on is a rural town, Colorado. It's a small town that has a main street that went through the town. We've talked about Main Street economy, and because of a high frequency of crashes, they built a bypass around the town, a highway bypass. And now the main street is dead because there isn't really car traffic there anymore. And the businesses that were there used to have billboards, tattoo parlors, hat shops, and now the trucking traffic is not there anymore. And so the town is desperate to figure out how they can fix their economy. And so the lane of traffic that's not being well utilized can now be utilized for dining, bike lanes, art, and to reactivate the space. And the businesses really, really appreciate the fact that this can now bring people to their storefront, to their street sign. This is a small town that already has abundant parking in a lot of driveways. There's liquor stores with 4 driveways. It's a very car-centric town, and so by us coming in doing a little bit of rethinking, it's a huge impact to the city. But what's nice about, well, I feel very blessed for being grown up in the Bay Area and working on these facilities in the Bay Area, because we've been tackling this problem for most of my career, most of my life, and I'm able to take a lot of the lessons learned that we've learned in this area and make sure that we don't do those same mistakes in a new town. And so some of the things that we may do is not put too much green paint or too much posts or too much of the stuff that we might love to do here, because we know about the animosity that may come in these different communities. And so every client, every city, and every community is quite different. And CROSSROAD Lab, we've been around for 4 years. We've built around 74 miles of bikeway here in the Bay Area in the 4-year time frame, and every single road and every single facility is quite different, because every single city and every single traffic engineer has an opinion about how these facilities need to work. And there's a certain level of communication that we do through AutoCAD to ease their apprehension and liability from implementing these facilities.
So you know what I love though? I didn't do that. You know what I love though, and it's funny that you mention about our traffic engineers. One of the greatest things I think that Oakland has is that so many of our staff, our employees, are from Oakland and live in Oakland. And the reason that that's important is that they are passionate both about their work, which I think is critical, but I'll give you a quick story here, which is that we launched the Slow Streets program, we launched Flex Streets, and a lot of times I would get text messages from other directors who'd say, hey, you put a slow street around the corner for me. I wasn't on that at first, but I kind of like it. They get to use the thing that they are also participating in and designing. And I think that that's also really critical when we think, frankly, in my world, about public service, that planning for your own community is also kind of critical.
Yeah, definitely. And I would add to that is that every person who's on these projects has a very, very different take on these projects. When you talk to the business owner or the fire truck or the firemen or the police or anybody, they have a very, very different take. And one of the successes that we've had is we communicate them all on their playing field. So I don't talk to the fire department about bikes. I talk to them about their timing of the signals and their response time, because that's how their budgets work. And if I can improve their signal timing, then that's what they're paying attention to. When I talk to the cops, I talked about how the logistics of where they're going to stand and how they're going to direct people when they have these facilities. And so really, really understanding and working with every single different party, whether it's environmental services, about what type of dumpsters and the different companies that pick up the dumpsters and how the different loaders work. There's very, very different conversations needed with every single department. And when we do these kind of projects, a lot of them don't know that this is going to actually benefit them. They think bike projects, like they're scared by that, but it's actually a roadway project. It's actually a good design project. It's a complete street. And I do a lot of bike lanes, but in reality, I do utilities, drainage, paving, sidewalks, signals, lighting, street trees. Bike lanes is what is on the budget title for the political will, but in reality, we design roads. And so good design and no tripping hazards and not smelly streets with like a drain well is a common practice that we've had in our history forever. And it just not a lot of cities have maybe historically implemented them to that set standard or had the resources to do so, or there may be environmental constraints there beforehand, but we know these best practices now. And so working with everybody to eventually get to that final goal is how we get to good design and good streets. And I'm sure many of you have been to neighborhoods that are designed well and neighborhoods that are not, and you know the difference. And we can get those good neighborhoods everywhere. It just takes good design.
I was just holding my laughter. You were saying that the bike lanes are the thing that gets the political will, and sorry, I was like, oh my God, really? Okay, where is this? Where is this?
I would say by the politicians, but not by the people yet. And so there's convincing to that. But from a sustainability perspective, we know that we need to have bicycle facilities to actually move people, and we need to have micromobility to move people. We know that we can't be on a car path forever, and we can't,
right.
And so we know we need to get to that point, but what are the steps to convince that? And that could be reducing the timing for the emergency vehicles, or getting parking in front of the business, or bike parking in front of the business. And these are the steps to eventually get us to that sustainable future.
And this is how I'm, if you haven't joined the YIMBY movement, I am now drafting you all into it, because I remember asking Warren, how do you get your fire department to say yes to these things? Because in San Francisco, they're like, no, we're not closing that down, we're not slowing that, no. And he said, what?
And it's tying just after Mr. Barricade, actually. So one of the reasons why I think our programs have been so successful is that we launched them through what's called our Emergency Operations Center. In other words, it's our Justice League. So at the beginning of the emergency, we drafted, of sorts, a lot of different directors and their staff out of their day-to-day jobs, including the fire department. So I had one of the fire chiefs in the community resilience team right there at the table, so that when I'd say, hey, what do you think about this idea? He could already start to have that conversation with us.
But where does he live?
And he lives in Oakland.
That's it, people.
On one of the slow streets. Oops,
You
how'd that
need
happen?
you need
Strategic
to,
placement.
Yeah. You need a housing. You need a housing. I can't stress enough how land use and transportation are connected. You need the people that are making these decisions and planning these things to live there as well. Because if they don't get the chance to experience it, then it's just the thing slowing them down, not the thing that their kids can play on as well. Sorry, I will make a brief departure just because I was so kind of like, huh? Colin, you sent me some press releases about a venture that, like, you have, who's sponsoring you guys now?
Well, it was in the media just this week. We have a partnership with Shell Energy, and Europe's largest parking operator, Alcoa. A really interesting partnership. We never thought we'd be, sitting there in a big partnership with Shell. Ironically, when we used to start, we said, hey, we're like the gas station of the future. And now we're doing business with the gas station, one of the bigger old school gas stations. But in particular, they're, a lot of these big, they call themselves energy companies now, not oil. They really are starting to kind of support fossil-free emissions. And in Europe in particular, we're starting to deploy our stations in a lot of these parking garages where they're repurposing them. Now, especially with COVID, more people are driving, unfortunately, instead of taking the train or the tram, and they're parking on the outer skirts of the city. They park there, and now they've got this great micromobility option, but they need more order to it. We create these mobility hubs, and so you can see ahead of time what's there. You can rent the vehicle, and then they're always charged. And then we work with Tier as our scooter operator. That's the one bringing them in. But the interesting kind of dynamic there is we're also putting those on Shell gas stations themselves, branded as Shell Recharge, which is their electric vehicle brand. And then we're also putting those outside in the community, in the street furniture zones in Berlin and Stuttgart, and soon to be in Karlsruhe. So it's a really interesting, fun kind of a partnership that's helping us really scale in a big way in Europe.
And it's funny, oil companies. But I remember seeing in New Orleans, of all places, a bike racks with a big crest on them that was like Shell, as if, so Shell paid for the bike racks, which it blew my mind. But that reminds me, Courtney, you were helping out New Orleans to try and reimagine the French Quarter. How is that going?
It's really awesome. I mean, New Orleans is just a great place in general. I don't know if everyone's been there, but they've been very, very active during COVID, especially because they have such a strong, I think, music culture and just outdoor space opportunity that they've just been pushing out designs over and over and over again, just trying new things, trying different times of day, different setups, different things. It's just really exciting to see not just the big cities doing, New Orleans is a pretty big city, but I'm really excited to see more other cities try to take this on. And I think like people doing what Mr. Barricade is doing will help kind of democratize that and make it more accessible.
Yeah, please get out all the cars out of the French Quarter. That was actually where I watched the pandemic go down. That was my last, I came home on the 17th of March. And so via train, because I didn't want to fly. And it was just mind-boggling to me to see that the people were being shoved aside so that the cars could drive on through this really rich historic district that is just absolutely made for people. Yeah. All right, who wants to add anything on? Or tell me how to get cars off of the Eastern Embarcadero? Make Valencia for the people. Best Market Street in San Francisco. Any thoughts here?
I have an idea, and it's actually returning to Vignesh's point earlier about, and I almost want to push back. I don't actually think that most people, not us, we're great, care about bicycling. I don't think that most people care about scooters. What they do care about, though, is experiences. And I think what's really interesting is that we talk about our streets specifically for a mobility experience, and by extension, driving. And what we found with all of the different iterations that we've spun up is that when you start to talk to people, not about the lane widths and what they're looking for in the mobility sphere, but using that same space for playing with their kids. I got sent a video of someone doing a dance-a-thon on one of the slow streets, right? Like helping folks not just reimagine their mobility, but really reimagining how they use the space altogether. Then it opens the door back up in the reverse way of sorts for spaces that are safe enough for people to walk and bicycle and scoot, et cetera. And I think that that's a really critical element. I'll make a transition, though, to the first time I rode an e-bike, which is that it was actually only a couple of years ago, and that thing kicked. Like, it was just so fast, and it was this experience that I'd never had before of, like, joy, right? Like, fun riding a bike again, just like I was a kid hauling ass down a hill, right? And those are the types of things that I think are really critical to inject back into these conversations to convince folks in San Francisco to do these types of innovative solutions.
Well, I think
Agreed.
we also need to talk about parking because we talked about this. I think a lot of times what we found is the parking department tends to be the biggest blocker to a lot of the slow streets activities
Not ours.
because they generate revenue. So I'm curious, Warren, how you guys are thinking about that conversation, parklet-wise or not.
It's not a problem. And Ryan, are you still here? Okay, well, I'm going to say what our DOT director said, which is our job is to manage the entire street. It is not to pull revenue out of drivers. We will worry about whatever parking is left.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
How do we transport that?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Let's a round of applause for Ryan Russo, and please inject some of that westward, and for our panel. Thank you so much.